I want to have uncomfortable conversations. I want the room to be divided. I want people to be screaming and mad at each other. Then I want them to understand each other. I want to see things from a different point of view. This is Unpopular Opinion. Greetings, upstanding citizens. It's us again. Thank you so much for your support. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all the important things. Please follow us on social medias. We are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, so check us out. Celebrate the content, spread the content so that the channel can grow. Today, we're doing your favorite subject again, guys. We're talking about Africa again. So I'm very excited. We've got you an Africologist. There's a lot of confusion around our own history. You know how our schools are. We don't get taught our own things. So Unpopular Opinion is where we're going to start unpacking so that neither was upendula when people come at you about your own things. We've got Menzi Ka Maseko. We tell you don't want to be called Menzi.
It's Afrikaans.
Oh, is that where the name Boet comes from?
Yeah, Boet. B-O-E-T-I-E. Boet.
No, sis.
Yeah, it's just we spell it in a synth. We say B-H-U-T-I. Oh, C. Oh, I'll see. You know, sounds nice. Shortening acronyms, but they are colonial.
So our colonialism is on such a
ingrained.
Yeah. Okay, so before I get into the African colonialism and your gifts, I want the audience to know who you are, where you grew up, and your biog.
Okay, quick one.
Yes.
Menzi Maseko wakwaMashu. Igama seliphelele uMenzi Ka Gudu Maseko, Gudu being my father. We all know that in ancient Africa, we do not actually carry surnames, but we carry our se within our names. So basically, when I say Ka Gudu, I'm saying son of. Yes. Right. So wakwaMashu eThekwini was born in 1978, just after they've taken out most of the most fiery revolutionaries. I grew up in that township. Where do I start? Studying. No, I'll skip to high school. I'll skip to tertiary.
First, tell me in your family, because we want to know where the consciousness and the African...
it comes from.
So your parents, what impact they had on you, your background?
My parents were into... let me start this. My father was a Kung Fu teacher. He taught Kung Fu. He was what they call a Kung Fu master. We don't call it a teacher. He was a master. He had a school at the YMCA yakwaMashu, and it shifted to another school in Ngazane, where I went to primary school. So his school taught about 100 people per week, teaching Kung Fu, Tai Chi, those martial arts, which he called discipline. He never called it fighting.
Yes.
So I got that discipline. Obviously, now I was ofunda kuyenza from an early age. So self-defense was also very important in what we call in Rasta, we call it ticklish or sensitive sport, or violent sport, as we would call it. KwaMashu is one of those places as famous for being quite ticklish, sensitive, a little aggressive. So you need to know how to defend your body and your mind and your spirit from all these things. So Kung Fu came in handy. So they also were into music, big things like Malombo, things like Fela Kuti. So at home, consciousness begins with music. It began with the self-discipline, Kung Fu, but then there was music at the home, the kind of music that compels you to think outside of the box. At that time, they just called it underground. Ubaba was into underground music, the Jimi Hendrix, the reggae music, the Peter Tosh, the Third World, and all those things. So from then on, you grow up. I mean, I studied marketing. I went to DUT, which is called Steve Biko now. That time it was called Technikon Natal. I'm that old, or that grown. It was called Technikon Natal. I studied marketing. And then while I was studying, I was working at Coca-Cola and MTN and all these things. But then I dropped out because I started realizing, because of that consciousness,
Yes.
I'm working for somebody and I'm getting paid to actually feed a system that's not feeding my community. So I looked around in my community and asked myself, what are all these businesses actually doing besides taking from us? And what is my contribution to that neo-colonial thievery that is happening through the corporations, which are using us, our bright brains and our bodies, black bodies, basically working to churn out money for somebody else. So I hopped out, started seeking what ngifuna ukwenzani. At first, I thought it was music. I don't have a great voice for singing, but I sing because I want to. So I thought I'll do music.
Yes.
We hustled with my mother trying to do music, and she's like, no, you're not doing music. You're going to complete your marketing, or else choose something as a kokela, business administration. Choose something. But I'm like, mother, you can see I'm not that employable type. I don't want to be employed. I want to do entrepreneurship. I want to do, but at that time we were not quite savvy with entrepreneurship.
Yes.
You know. So a friend of mine that I went to high school with, Malus Mbonambi, we started a business called Siavaya Travel and Tours. We started a township tourism business. So we would take Abantu. We will mostly focus on Nama Summit. You know, we live near the ICC. We are we are Urbanites. There's always these conferences. There's always these people coming into Durban, but they always go to the spots that are designated for them, the beach, the tourist spot.
Yes.
But who goes to the township? People come to South Africa, they want to know how authentic people live. So we started Siavaya for that. Few years after that, after Siavaya, me and myself and a brother by the name of Papi from Congo, Papi Kalu, we started something called Eben Zulu. Again, inspired by the music of Busim Shongo, Matala Gunene, the Melt 2000, Moses Molelekwa vibe. We're like, okay, tourism is fine, but we are still working within perimeters defined to us by a constructed society, a constructed reality for us. Siavaya is fine. It was making money. Pasaqala drift apart Nomalus. As we were drifting apart Nomalus, Bonambi is a good friend of mine still from high school, from standard 6. Standard. Yeah, that's how old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started Eben Zulu because I was selling books at that time.
Yes.
Because I was inspired by Onguki Wationgo, inspired by Mama Ata
I
Aidu.
came to your shop once.
You came to our shop, to Eben Zulu. I think wahamba either no Zuki Vutela, no wahamba no.
Yes. with
Wahamba
the
no Nzo.
quotes.
Unzo was one of our clients.
Our social media strategist on the show.
So Unzo kuhle nabanye, they would come to the shop because Eben Zulu was a bookshop, a clothing shop, a salon. So it was kind of like a mixture of everything. What Papi is still doing now at a higher level. Tina, we started it at Priya. I mean, I was selling books out of my bag.
Yes.
I didn't have a car then. I was selling books out of my bag. Papi was selling at, it was not called Eben Zulu then. I don't know what it was called. But he was selling with his sister and his brother at the flea market workshop. I was like, dude, your clothes are so good. People want this stuff, but it needs to be presented in a proper way. We need a shop. I don't have Imali, but let's hustle. Came up with 10,000. He came up with 20,000 or something. We got a space. We rented it. It was a saloon. We painted the saloon. We put newspapers. We put cuttings of like some revolutionary stuff.
Yes.
You know how Eben Zulu looked.
Yes.
So we started. I was selling music, records. I'm an up and coming artist, hip hop, reggae artist.
This is early 2000s, right?
This is 2008 to be 2008 when we started Eben Zulu. And then it just moved from there. He was mostly selling clothes for bigger size sisters, you know, because, you know, they go to certain shops and they don't find their sizes, their shape and all that. And I was selling revolutionary books. By revolutionary, I just mean basically books that you won't find at your so-called exclusive.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of my bio. And then according to environmentalism, around that time, I studied something called zero waste management.
Okay.
So while we were doing Eben Zulu, I started my own brand called Green Unk Works, which was looking at how do you get Black business people to be environmentally conscious, to actually be conscious of the waste we create and things like that. So it was dealing with waste, but it was also dealing with a bit of a sankofa, you know, the thing of how do we make our history, our greatness live with us and actually help us to be conscious of the things that we are doing, how we're spending our money, how do we deal with waste and things that we are creating in the chain because we are part of this so-called neo-colonial chain of capitalism. We are in it, but do we want to contribute to it that much rather than create some kind of regenerative, Afrocentric...
Some parallel system.
Yeah, create a new paradigm. Yeah, because otherwise we're just consumers, you know, and we are creating things to be consumed. But are we just consumers? So Green Ank was looking at taking a step further to not actually stay consumers, but to become producers.
So, the land. Yes. Yeah, I'm going right in. Okay. Now I'm like, okay, we know you now.
Yeah.
We are fighting a system that has erased African history. And as a result, there's this myth that when white people got to Southern Africa, there were no people. And that is what is in contention at the moment. And so can you give us a history of Abantu and where we were on the continent and our movements so that we can just... Mabe kuluma, we're like, no, sweetie, it's
cancel their lives.
Yeah.
I'll summarize because African history is a million years. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousand years when you talk about umlando wesintu. Even the word ntu itself, maybe later we can just break it down too. But South Africa is izwe lethu, asiqale nje lapho. Africa izwe lethu lonke.
Yeah.
And in fact, izwe lethu even beyond the borders of what they call Africa, the African continent. Kusayizwe lethu. Umhlaba owethu thina abantu abamnyama. AmaSwati ke, I have Swati heritage because Maseko we are what we call omakhanzambili aseswatini. Makhanzambili means the ones that who came before the ones who are existing now. So we have Dlamini Eswatini ruling. But for 800 years before Dlamini, before 1840, the Maseko people, Ongcamane, Okubonye, Ondlovu zidle ekhaya, ngokwesola belusi, yithi besibusa eSwatini, kodwa besingabusi as overseers. We were stewards, we were servants of the land with other kingdoms. I always tell people that ngokwesintu, each and every African family is a kingdom and a queendom. But what does it mean and what does it entail? It means that umnumzane nonkosikazi uNdlunkulu nomnumzane. The word umnumzane, by the way, comes from the word umuzi, omncane. Khona umuzi, whereby you have many different homes within the homestead, within umuzi. Bese khona abanumzane, the heads of each and every family. So now labanumzane, this whole cosmology of African familyhood and kinghood and queenhood, it's something that we carry from Central Africa, where we come from. Why do I say we come from Central Africa? Because there are many different cradles. Ubaba Shekanta Diop speaks about two cradle theory. And then later his student, Theophilo Benga, they write books about African linguistics, African history. But what they are saying to us is that umsuka wabantu akuyona indawo eyodwa. For example, the so-called Bantu-speaking people, we are told that they come from the area of Yaoundé, what is called Cameroon by the colonialists. Yaoundé, Sao, those areas, right? That is West Africa. We are told that by historians that we come from West Africa as Abantu, and then must figure Congo, the Great Lakes region. Sasehlalana sahlukana sasplitter into different ngoni, ebahlubi, bambo, different families. Now remember, these are just children of small units of the same family. But now these families, khona abanye njengabathwa, ebatlokwa, and barotse, I think they called. They were always here. They were always here. In Eswatini, there was always people abangabatwa. Eswatini. That's why you find the lebombo bone that people speak about. The counting device. It's like a bone with little markings on it for counting and for calculating time, for calculating seasons, and for calculating not amalobolo per se, but for calculating the families that have been united through certain ritual and rites of marriage. So I am saying that there is a Southern African cradle for African people. There's a Northern African cradle, which is the Nile Valley. the Nile Valley, Meru, Napata, those areas which are called Kush in a nutshell. There are African people who were born there, who are from there. Like the original ones are like the Hamar people, the Oromo people, those who praise the great tree, who praise God in the name of Waka, the black god, Waka Kuracha. The black, it basically means the black supreme one. So they are from there. They met us in the Congo. Some of us were coming from West Africa. Some of us were coming from Southern Africa because we've always been migrating. So there is no one who comes from outside of Africa who can claim that Southern Africa, what is called South Africa now, this corporation called South Africa now, they cannot claim that it's theirs. Whether you are Afrikaner, whether you are Malay, Cape Malay, or whether you are from Holland or whether from the UK, cannot claim Africa as your home. No part of Africa is your home. You came here after being chased out for your inhuman acts. See, there were people who came up with us during the evolution of humankind. That did not act as Abantu. They did not have Ubuntu. They had patriarchal tendencies. I will explain how. You know, we have something called Abelungu. It's a misnomer. Abelungu were originally called Abelumbi, the sorcerers. They were people who were cast out of Southern Africa, or of the cradle of humankind. Every part of Africa whereby Ma'at and Isintu or Ubuntu or Unu, the Zimbabweans, the Karanga people call it Unu, which is basically an attitude of humaneness, an attitude which comes from being close to the Divine Mother.
Yes.
And the Divine Mother is every mother, by the way. It's not a goddess sitting somewhere in a heaven. So the Divine Mother is every girl. So when people that had warlike tendencies, and those people who had more warlike tendencies were mostly the people who were melanin deficient among us, amongst our own children. Those who were melanin deficient among us started grouping together and started forming societies which were led by warlords, led by men, led by people who want to take things by force rather than people who want to who negotiate, people who work through. I will convince you to see things my way, and now you will convince me through reasoning and through Isinto, through Ubuntu, to see things my way, so that we can go a particular direction that will be good for the community. But those who are called Okombela Gwesake, Kombela Gwesake means one who wants things for themselves only. They were called Abelumbi. They just so happened to be ones who were melanin deficient among us. So they were cast out of the great land called Africa, Ikaya Lesintu. They were cast out and they traveled to places where it was conducive for them to live the way they lived. Europe, and certain other parts which are outside the great continent.
Yes.
But when they got there, they still found people who were melanin dominant.
Yes. Because
Abantu, they are everywhere. In Australia, the original people of the Abantu. In New Zealand, the original people of the Abantu. Ntundu, by the way, just means brown, does not mean black, right? So when they go to America, the original people who were there. So you find that the ones who are aggressive, Abelumbi, the sorcerers, the word Ulumba comes from the word Ilumbo. Ilumbo is witchcraft. You see, we do not have witchcraft. We had craft with herbs, craft with water, craft with stones, like the stones we are wearing, or malachite, and all these stones that we use. They are power grids that we can either take and wear amongst us, or we can use them in MSAM, or we can use them for certain works and certain rites of passage that we have, right? So in Dayan's
Give us some more information on this.
Which the stone part or
the stones? The stones.
I'll summarize again. Umhlaba unama elements that have powers of healing. You know, let me start like this. Isintu is about the harmony between humanity and nature. That's what Isintu means. Isintu, people, they take it as if it just means no traditional or customary life. No. Those customs are based on the relationship between animals and men, humanity, men, English, animals and Abantu, umifula nabantu, intaba nomuntu, amanzi ngaphansi kwamanzi, izilwane ezingaphansi kwamanzi, nezilokazana nemimoya engaphansi kwamanzi nomuntu. So there's a relationship between, of course, what is above, of course, what is above and what is below. Right. It is an old ancient African rule. It's a Nilotic rule that the people of Egypt got from the people of Sudan also called people of Napata, ukuthi there is a law that says that loku okungaphezulu fale kulingane naloku okungaphansi, which means that which is above must be equal with that which is below. So now what does that mean? That means this precious stone malachite, which you find underground in certain mountains or in certain riverbanks, there is, and it has its equal somewhere amongst the stars. Your skin and the color of your skin. There is a planet, there is a star, there is an element up above, which reflects. Okay, let me put it in modern day terms, in the metaverse terms. They have something called quantum mechanics now and quantum physics. In quantum physics, they say that kukhona umunye Ntsiki somewhere who is just like Ntsiki but is living a different destiny. Kunomunye umenzi somewhere in another quantum part of the universe who's just like you, looks just like you, may think just like you, but is living according to a different rule because they are in a different context and they have different needs, right? So wonke umphefumulo unewele lakhe. Unewele lakho emanzini, nginewele lami emanzini. Unewele lami emlilweni, unewele lakho emlilweni. In the elements, the stone elements, the gold elements, the diamond elements, every single thing that is fossilized, because everything here is fossilized, even Nazi, we are made of carbon matter, which is basically fossilized energy. It's carbon that is made material, that is made physical, because I need, consciously, my consciousness wants to experience life as a physical being. So the spirit part manifests in the physical part. So let me put it this way also, just to summarize again. Yabona umuntu, masikhuluma ngomuntu, njengoba ngikhuluma nawe. Angikhulumi nesikhumba sakho, angikhulumi nedolo lakho, angikhulumi nomunwe wakho, angikhulumi namehlo akho. Amehlo akho ngiyawabuka yebo. But ngikhuluma nani? Nomphefumulo. Right? So mangikhuluma nomphefumulo, umphefumulo unani? Unenyama. Right? So ngokwesintu, all these elements must be in harmony. They must be in ma'at. There must be equilibrium between these things. The gold is not higher than me. It's not more expensive than me. I don't care how many ounces of gold I have. It cannot be more. It cannot be more expensive than Ubuntu. I don't care how much stones, malachites you have. I don't know how much water you have. We all need water. But water is not greater than a person, and a person is not greater than water. So therefore, a person must not waste water. Then a person must not pollute the soil. Just like the rules of Ma'at, there's these 42 laws. It says, do not pollute the water. Do not steal food of the gods. It says, I shall not. Because ngokwesintu imithetho yethu ithi it does not give you an admonition ukuthi ungenze ukuthi. When yourself, you must proclaim ukuthi, as a part of this natural environment, I will not pollute the water. I will not take my brother's wife. I will not steal. I will not kill for no reason. I will not be angry I will not even involve myself in matters that don't involve me, because those matters, contextually, they belong to those that they belong to, right? So these are rules, these are, how can I say, natural laws that Abantu bakithi, okhokho bethu, they codified into rituals, they codified into drawings on the wall, into papyrus, into amasiko, so that we can live in harmony with each other and live in harmony with nature. And then they used elements, they use impepho. Like, for example, if you ask someone, when did we start using helichrisium? Why is helichrisium the one that connects with Abantu abadala? Why imbuzi not enokwacha? Why Inkomo for ilobolo and not? Because these rules have been set since time immemorial to how can I say? It's like coded language. Inkomo itself, just like, that's why isiZulu said, when you talk about a woman's private part, you say Inkomo, but again Inkomo yakhe. Inkomo kabane, kagogo, nekamkhulu. Wena uhamba nenkomo kababa wakho. Inkomo kababa wakho is not taken by some guy without first respecting ukuthi there's a connection between your great grandparents, your father and mother who give birth to you, and lenkomo eyakhokhwa when there was an exchange between these two families. So we're not saying inkomo just because whatever, no, no. We're not saying it's inkomo because we're saying inkomo because that particular animal has a divine connection. It's part of the symbolic.
Because of the way it looks.
I
know.
That's what I see.
Now at least I know that Inkomo yam is very expensive.
Yeah. It's priceless.
It's incredible. So let's talk about because now you just gave us the history of Inkomo and how it relates to Ilobola.
Yeah.
You're talking about how the animals, why we chose the different animals and
For
in
certain
our
rituals.
rituals. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, we don't have a lot of written languages as Abantu, but we have lived languages, cultural language. So each and every aspect of our life, it communicates. You know, when fashionistas say, "Ama combo, I communicate." So even Actina, ama code, I communicate. We know that igazi libiza elinye, but igazi lembuzi does not speak the same language as igazi lenkomo. Like igazi lenkukhu does not, igazi legusha, igazi lebhokwe, alikhulumi the same language as igazi lesinye isilwane.
What do you mean? And also, can I ask, you must try keep it in English because our audience is all over the world and they're always complaining in the comment section.
Yes. So igazi is blood, right? So we are saying blood speaks, and each different blood of each animal speaks a different language. And not just the blood, but also the skin of that animal, the sound that it makes when it cries or when it speaks. It speaks a different language. It speaks a different language amongst the animals. It speaks a different language between the animal and man, but it also speaks a different language, speaks different coded language, signs and symbols and semiotics between that animal and the ancestors or the spiritual world, right? So let's begin here. Amongst African people generally, the dead are not dead, right? So the dead exist, but they exist in a different realm. We don't die. What we do, we transition, right? So in our transitioning to a different realm, the different context, we take on different roles. The role that I'm playing here, when I can still till the soil, when I can still plant a seed and it grows. I'm talking about planting the seed in different ways now. You can plant the seed in the soil. You can plant the seed in a woman, and things happen, right? So the function that I have as a living person, it's a preparatory function. I'm preparing so that I can become an ancestor. Now, there are certain things that certain relationships that I should be having with other living entities that should be maintained in a harmonious way. Which is, by harmonious, I mean non-abusive, non-superior, non-inferior, right? What do I mean by that? I mean that according to African cultural practices in different parts of Africa, remember we are diverse. When you speak about the Shilluk people of northern Sudan, and you speak about the Yoruba people of West Africa, right? And we speak about the Nguni people of Southern Africa, there are certain cultural practices that are so similar amongst us. Yet there are things that are diverse, that make us unique, that make us diverse. All those different and similar cultural practices, they show, there are certain codes within them that show that we are all related. We're related how? There's a superficial level. On the superficial level, or on a general level, let me put it this way, we all reverence the dead. We revere our generations. Our ancestors are the closest thing to God for us. Other people call Idlozi an angel. I say in one of my bios that I am Tongo-centric. Kona into ekuthiwa iTongo. iTongo is like isithunywa. Isithunywa now, now that we've become Christianized and Islamized and Abrahamic religious. We take things that are isintu and we try to find parallels in these Abrahamic religions, right?
Yes.
But now the problem with that is the fact that we end up getting lost in translation. When I talk about a Tongo, I'm talking about an ancestor on the spiritual realm, not someone who has lived. Idlozi is someone who has lived, like Izinyanya or Abapansi. We say Abapansi because they are buried. Izithuli, other words, it's called Izithuli. Those who are quiet, the still ones. They have lived before. They are part of your genealogy. They are part of your bloodline. They are quiet. They perform a different ritual. They perform a different function between yourself and the creator, the source of being, who comes with different names, whether it's Atum, whether it's Nyame, whether it's Menzi. Umenzi wezinto zonke. Are you Menzi? The one you see in the physical. Kunu Menzi ngokwesiZulu. When you speak about God, you speak about Umenzi or Umdali. or Mlenze Munye. There's many different names. So the point I'm making is that these animals, our forebears, our ancestors, they had natural laws that governed how each animal, the function of every animal within each society. The function of Inkomo within society is not just to pull the plow. It pulls the plow, but it is also not just bride wealth, but it is also a symbol for that family's pride and dignity. It's wealth. It's wealth, though, in a wide sense, in a form like if you talk about prosperity, you're not just talking about when you talk about prosperity, you are talking about the health of the family and the relationship between the family and other families. When you talk about prosperity, you're talking about intergenerational health and wealth. What is passed on within that family? What kind of wealth has been passed on between your mother and father and yourself? When you speak about prosperity also, you're talking about what are the articles of faith? What are amasiko? What are amasiko that are good, that keeps that family, that define that family? My friend Mbuso Koza speaks about each and every family has ihubo lomden. But what is ihubo lomden? Ihubo is a hymn for that family. And now it goes into a micro level. The family has a hubo. You, Ntsiki, Nam Menzi, I have to have my hymn, my song that connects me to my ancestors and the song that connects me to the stars. Because one day when I pass away, I have two fates. I either become an ancestor underground, Wapans, or I become Owasezulwini. I become part of Amazulu. I'm not talking about the tribe, so-called tribe, the nation. I'm talking about there are there's African folklore, African mythology that speaks about there are certain ancestors who ascend, who become ascended beings, who become part of the stars. We're not talking about gaseous elements that are in space and planets. We are talking about izinkanyiso zezulu. Onkanye is just like you have a person by the name of Nkanyezi, Onkanyiso. It is coming from the fact that in our coded language, in our DNA and in our history, we know that izinkanyiso zezulu nezinkanyiso zaphansi ziyafana. Siyafana nokusezulwini, siyafana nokulaphansi. So that's why I say that umhlaba wethu as African people is part of our coded language, is part of our what makes sure, what ensures our dignity. If it's taken away from us, we lose not just wealth, we lose not just our prosperity, but we lose our dignity, we lose our relationship with, like for example, imagine if a mall is built over the grave of your 4 generations of your grandmothers and your grandfathers. A mall is built on that. People are walking over that space where your ancestors lived. But now this has happened almost all over Africa, everywhere where it's developed. There are constructions. Other people are living there, sleeping there, having strange dreams, but they don't know why they're having strange dreams. Because we are living on graves. We are building businesses, we are building homes, we are building institutions on top of graves. Some are deliberate. Some churches are actually built on top of sacred sites like Africa. Abelumbi, they've deliberately built certain churches and certain institutions like city halls. Certain city halls, like the Durban City Hall, is built on the graves of certain Nguni people that resided there and they ruled there and they did rituals there. But we go there and we praise the Lord, or we go there and we do other things, you see. So we have to be very careful with those kinds of things.
Sure.
The land and its connection with us as spiritual beings, not just as physical beings.
Because, another thing that always is in conflict is that how white people relate with land is not the same as how we relate to land.
It's property.
Right?
Yeah,
we don't believe that's why there's that's why we can't get the land back, because we don't think like that. We don't own the land.
Even as we buy it, like for example, I've been looking for pieces of land, KwaZulu. So when I go to look for pieces of land, I keep asking how much. But the people of the locals, they say, but you're asking the wrong language, you're asking the wrong thing. You're not buying. Even though there will be a monetary exchange. You ask for the land, and then the nduna, the custodian, or the steward who is looking after that particular piece of land. He's looking after it for the king. But the king is looking after it for Nomkhubulwane. And Nomkhubulwane is looking after it for Umvilinqangi. So you see this hierarchy. It's a divine hierarchy. The great father, the source of life, gives his thunywa zakhe, oNomkhubulwane, oNomhoyi, all these divine spirits, roles. Nomkhubulwane, for example, looks after rain, looks after izingadi, what you call places for grazing. Not for grazing, but for growing food. So Nomkhubulwane governs that as the divine spirit of that. But uthunyiwe bani umdali wezinto zonke. And then beneath Nomkhubulwane kukhona amakhosi oselwa. Amakhosi oselwa means the kings that have eaten the god. The god is like it's like a pumpkin, man. I don't know, it's like a wild pumpkin oselwa. But it is part of the ritual that a king, when they are anointed, or before they are coronated, there's an anointing. When the king is appointed through sometimes succession through their father, their mother, or whatever, when the ruler, the custodian of the land, is given that role, there's a certain ritual, it's secret ritual, some of them we cannot divulge on medias.
Yes.
But there are certain rituals where you eat something, and that's why it's called, for example, Inkomo is called Modli Waselo. What does it mean? There is a certain ritual where he eats something, and when he eats that thing, he becomes the guardian, the master guardian of that land. And then he appoints izinduna that are going to govern the little pieces of that land. So now when I'm coming to ask for land, I don't go to I'm using Mrs. Zulu as an example. I don't go to Inkosi Mrs. Zulu, KwaZulu. I go to Induna Makhathini or Induna Umakhanya or Induna Mlefe in that place. And Induna Mlefe will first have an interview with me. What kind of person are you? Why did you live where you are coming from? Did they chase you out? And if they chased you out, why were you chased out? Or if you're coming here, what contribution are you going to be to the community? And then according to, you have how many? You have 5 children. You're going to need more than 2 hectares. So if you give you more than 2 hectares, what is it? What exchange are you willing to give for us? Right. And then that kind of exchange, that bartering exchange. Nowadays, because of the currency that we have, there will be some money exchange, but there must be a ritual, there must be umcimbi, whereby I am introduced to the community.
Yes.
I'm not being introduced just to the land. I'm being introduced to the community. Best thing figure, before I build the house, I don't know how to say it in English. Though, it's almost like, not scrying, but grid work. You are coming to I'm coming to introduce my ancestors to that land by putting certain pillars in the perimeters where I'm going to be living in. So I introduce the spirits first, and then I come to build the hedge. Once I build the hedge, then I invite the families around that area to come and welcome me. Inkomo, or sihlabe whatever animal that is I can afford at that time. And then we have umcimbi, and that ritual is to welcome me into the land. So that, do you see, I didn't just buy property.
Yes.
Yeah, buying property is different.
Africans are so interesting because there's processes.
Yeah, that process is important because it introduces you not just as a physical being to the land, it introduces you as a spiritual being, umphefumulo, or umenziwa. Menziwa means basically the created one. I'm created by somebody. So that somebody, I have to introduce them here.
So there's often talk that in is a cosmology or the stars. Cosmology is related to us Africans.
Yes.
And Kalengat.
Yeah. So
can you break that down for us? Because we don't have any information.
In short, we are just the first people. Being the first, let me put it this way also. I don't want us as Africans to think that we are the only ones with certain things. We are just the first ones, being the first people. Okay, let's start from the colonizers like to use this against us to say Abatwa, they were here first. Yes, Abatwa, they were here first, but Abatwa, they are us. They are part and parcel of us. And not just Amaxhosa also. They're not just related to Amaxhosa people called Amaxhosa, Namampondo. Abatwa, we are all interrelated with Abatwa because we've all interbred as Africans as we travel.
what's the differences between Abantu and
Oh, they were yellowish in color.
Nabantu
They had big
and-
buttocks and all this nonsense that we learn in school when we are in primary school, which is basically a superficial history. We are being
when
taught.
they're saying Abokoisan,
Yeah, we are being taught colorism. The Ngunis are darker and a bit taller. Or they practice like this, or they don't do circumcision, and these ones do circumcisions, or these ones are matriarchal, or these ones are patriarchal, or this. So all those are superficial divisions created to make us be at odds with each other rather than find commonalities and familyhood within each other. So cosmology basically is just knowledge of stars and knowledge of our relationship, of course, our relationship with the stars, right? Now, when we talk about stars, though, we are not just talking about izinkanyezi. We are talking about planets too. The first people to name the constellations were us African people. We named these constellations because we were needing direction. So it's very simple. It was not rocket science, even though there was science in it. In order to find direction to a certain place, as we were trading, as we were moving, as we were migrating, we will know, okay, this is a Sagas Banbani. During a full moon in a particular year, in a particular season, they followed the northern star. So they went north. But then they don't only follow the northern star, they also followed Islimela. Islimela being Orion, right? Now, why did they follow Orion? Well, they followed Orion because in their folklore, they heard that their ancient netero, itongo labo lakdala, liqhamuka from Orion. Itongo from Orion, for example, is like Osa, for example. Osa being an ancient Egyptian deity who actually came from inner Africa. He's said to have come from beyond the stars. He came from the constellation called Orion or Islimela. It just so happened that Islimela means the plow, right? Now, the plow is for ukulima. It's just so happened also that in that same myth, Osa is related to plowing the land and harvesting and renewal of the land. So there is a connection between what was being discovered about the stars in the Nile Valley. By Nile Valley, by the way, I mean from the source of the Nile in Uganda to Sudan, to Ethiopia, to Sudan, to Egypt. But now when you speak about the Nile, most people think, it's only Egypt. No, the Ugandan people have the source of the Nile. Some people in Libya have the source of the Yellow Nile. The White Nile begins in Ethiopia. The Blue Nile begins in Uganda, you see. So, but that Nile is just a river. So our ancestors, in our migrations, we follow the river. We follow the river banks. We travel by the rivers because source of life, water.
Yes.
But we also follow the stars, again, because source of timing. You see, our consciousness is linked with the stars. So, and we named not just stars as individual planets or individual heavenly bodies. We named whole constellations according to, remember I said, as above, so below. Okhokho bethu, even in Malawi, or even in Tanzania, or even in amongst the Himba people in Namibia, they all have a name for the Milky Way. They all have a name for the galaxy. They all have a name for what they call Jupiter. They all have a name for Mercury. They all have a name for Indonza. They all have a name for Isimpambano. I think, in fact, Orion is Mpambano, right, which means the cross. It's the name for the Southern Cross. It's called Izimpambano, which is a cross, right? We had symbols for these things. The Chewa people symbolize them in their wood frames. They used to make these coffins. They used to make these ritualistic boards. But they will put stars in them, and the way the stars are shaped up there, they will put this on their carvings, on their sculptures, right? And those sculptures were used just as symbols to connect the physical person to their spirituality and to their cosmology. Because our spirituality is tied not to supernatural beings that are written in books. Our spirituality is tied to nature and to the way nature functions. Because now we should be functioning like nature functions. You know, there's a drought right now. And the drought is because there's a certain behavior that we are exhibiting that is causing lack. You know, there are certain things that are happening in terms of war. That means our systems, our human systems, our interactions as social beings are in disharmony. So the wars are going to manifest. And the manifestation of war is a manifestation of disharmony within something in our social relations. The way we are treating girls, maybe. The way we are treating women, maybe. The way we are treating the rivers. The way we are treating strangers. You know, whether we should be treating them better or we should be treating them worse. I'm talking about strangers who destroy, you know. So those things. So it's seen to say it basically is there to remind us, Uguti, how much in harmony and in equilibrium we should be between ourselves and nature. Because we are natural beings.
It's so difficult. I mean, I'm going back to that land thing and how we relate to land and how white people relate to land. It's difficult because by nature, we're not going to fight that.
But we have to fight for defense. We have to do defensive fighting. You see, into that is worthwhile to you. Because you remember, as African people, we are also warrior people. We are not just peace, lovey-dovey people. We love love, yes. But we love love so much that we must protect it with our lives. We must protect it with weapons. So there is going to come a time, because in South Africa, Southern Africa especially, I don't like the word South Africa. In Southern Africa, we have tried legal ways to obtain our land. We have tried negotiating for our land. We have tried treaties. We have tried to be exempted by colonial powers so that we can find ways to diplomatically ask for land. Now, but was the land asked for? No, no one came and asked for it. They came and took it. So now we have to take it back. One of the parties, I won't mention the name, one of the political parties in Southern Africa is always disputing this issue of land reparation or restitution. They always say, no, you must restore the land. To restore it, to take that which originally belonged to somebody and return it back. So that land return, the language is very important because it tells, it speaks against that notion of Uguti. No, these people who have developed the land, the ones who stole it, they've developed it in such a way, now they have to either sell it back to us or it has to be, what's the word? There's a word that they use, expropriate, and all these words. These are just legal terms which complicate a very simple matter of the fact that Abantu kumele bezi organized. Not fancy be organized. We must organize ourselves for the restoration of our land. If we are disorganized, we can get back the land tomorrow or even today.
I know,
and then we'll fight over it, we'll kill each other over it because we have no idea what to do with it. We have no idea in terms of its deep significance to us. Right now, I'm staying in Centurion. But we have to, if let's say Centurion is an experiment, let's experiment with Centurion. Okay, let's do a land restoration program at Centurion. Who's going to leave and who's going to stay? Whose right is it to stay there? Let's go to KwaZulu, the whole of KwaZulu. Are we going to restore it to 500 years ago conditions? Or are we going to restore it to 300 years ago when King Shaka, or 200 years, when King Shaka started creating those creating that empire? If we take it back 500 years, how was it constituted? Was it property? BBL? Was it each one to himself? Or you see? So we have to think very carefully about land restoration and actually plan it. We have to start now. Otherwise, we're going to leave our children with a mess.
Yep. With nothing.
With a big mess. Like, landlessness is actually the most serious problem we have. We can talk about other things. We can speak cosmology and all these beautiful things. But landlessness is our biggest problem.
So we're talking about family and the importance of family in Africa. Can we talk about Umsamo and the importance of the kraal?
Umsamo is the kraal and the kraal is Umsamo. But Umsamo is also yourself and your family. It may sound contradictory, but each and every family had a kraal, a family kraal, Isibaya. Isibaya being the place where, again, the cattle stay. The cattle sleep there, but they don't stay there during the day. During the day and in the mornings, after we take out the cattle, there are certain rituals that are done, like burying certain articles of the family. They are buried Esbayen. And Esbayen is a place where we gather also to discuss heavy topics of the family. Not basic things like, okay, no. But when you have to discuss things like, okay, maybe the head of the family has passed, or a child has passed, or someone is going to get married, or something's going to happen like a
Life
larger ritual.
changes.
Things that are life affirming and life changing. They are discussed esibayeni. But now also, according to umuzi wesintu, other families can gather around the kraal also. Other families, not, I'm saying that family yaga Maseko can meet in family yaga Dladla and family yaga Sibisi and family yaga Makhathini around the kraal, because the kraal acts as these days they use the word temple. They say the kraal or Isbaya is the temple of African people. Now, again, it's that thing of mixing Abrahamic epistemology, so to speak, or ontology, I don't know, knowledge systems. We are mixing two knowledge systems in order to come up with words that suit the modern context. We do not have a temple. The reason why we do not have a temple, it's because we do not worship one God. It's a controversial issue. Most African people like to believe there is just one, we have a one God theory. It is so far from the truth. We do believe that there is a source of life, which is a singular source of life. But that singular source of life has multiple dimensions and multiple functions and multiple attributes. These multiple attributes have their names. Just like, some of our elders speak about, okay, kuno Menzi, the head of the God family, of the God. By being the head does not mean that is the first one, is the source. And then you have Umvelinqangi. And then you have Nomkhubulwane, you have Uma, you have Nomho, you have Mlenzemunye, you have Sonzwapi, you see all these different names. And when you have a name, like, for example, a word like Simagade, which signifies the great tree.
Yes.
Simagade. Isini, Isihlahla. But that great tree is just symbolic of the source, the one source. Nomkhubulwane being the great mother is also symbolic of the feminine part of a particular, of the source of life, a singular source. So we do not have a temple whereby we go there and we call upon Nomkhubulwane. For example, for Nomkhubulwane, you have to go to the mountain. The rituals for Nomkhubulwane are done in Ntsimini and in the mountain, right? And the ritual for Nomhoyi, who is the twin sister of Nomkhubulwane, are done in the rivers, in Popomeni, which is what is called waterfalls. They are done in pure running rivers. They're not done in lakes. If you want to speak about to the lakes, there is a particular deity, a neter or a tongo, Stunywa, Skamenzi, which deals with Iziziba. We will talk about Nyandezulu, which is the great spirits in the heaven, the heavenly snake or the heavenly serpent, which is called Nyandezulu. It's not the same as Nomkhubulwane. It's not the same as Ma. It's not the same as Magad. They are all different attributes of the same. So now, when you talk about Umsamo, you are simply speaking about a space whereby the family goes to have inter-spiritual, remember the spirit person and the spirit that are past, and the spirits of the source spirits. The conversation between spirits happens in Samo. That's when Impepo is burned. That's where the candles, the lights, does not have to necessarily have to be a candle. That's where the light is burned that keeps the relationship, the fire, the fiery relationship. Because remember, we are talking about different elements. All these different elements are elements of life. You are made of fire. You are hot right now. There's part of you which is hot. Whether it's the head, whether it's the blood, whether it's the oxygen, the air that you're breathing in, there is an element of fire. There's an element of water in you. There's an element of different stones. There's an element of different ether. There's an element of, So all these elements, Umsamo is the place where these elements congregate. That is where your ancestral line is communicated with. So I said earlier that Umsamo Omkulu is a spire, whereby the nation can gather, the whole Muzi being houses congregated together, they make Umuzi. Ikaya is one home where people of one lineage are staying. That's Ikaya. But Umuzi is a village, so to speak, right? So the village can gather at Umsamo Wesizwe, which is Isbaya, where angithi kunesibaya sakini kunesibaya senkosi, osenduna yaleyo ndawo. That sibaya is umsamo wesizwe. Umsamo wesizwe samaZulu, it is where Inkosi uMsizulu was crowned. That's umsamo wesizwe samaZulu, which is why he could say that when he did receive this coronation, he could say, now since sengiphumile nginile esibayeni ngabuye ngaphuma, now seningaya ukuyovula imisamo yenu. He said that, it was recorded on TV, that he was saying that now you can go on a ritual level. Your personal msamos are now open. You can now congregate and communicate with your ancestral spirit. Not that people were not doing it before, but there is an official, the king, as I said already, the ruling monarch represents, I could say, even God to his people. I mean, for example, his father was called Ongangezwe. He is as large as his whole nation. He is as large as his nation, right? When you hail him, which means you of the heavens. See, there are all these different codes that we use. And we say Bayete, not Bayete. People say Bayete, it's the wrong word. You say Bayete, which means basically the ones, your subjects must bow. Even your enemies must bow. Uyeta is to. Is to bow.
My goodness.
So let them bow.
Bayete?
It's not Bayete is an etymological mistake that has developed and become a word, a non-word like booty.
Because I thought it was related to Bayete, Bayegute or something.
No. Bayete. Bayete, mabayete. When something bows. Yeah. So the king represents the connection between the father of people, which is so-called father God, so to speak, and the mother, the queen's mother, and the king's partner represents the mother of that nation. Now they are I always say this, they are the microcosm, but maybe I should use a different word. They are the symbolic father and mother of the nation. So they must uphold the laws of the land perfectly. They must be righteous in the land so that the rest of the nation acts righteously. They do the ritual that represents all our rituals in our different single homes. And I think that in many different African cultures it's the same, because there is a relationship between the divine and the king. There's something called the divine right of kings. People would ask, of course, why Bona? Why that family must be worshipped?
Yes.
Why even worship? Why even praise?
Yes.
Because God alone should be praised.
Yes.
But the institution of kingship comes from God. The institution of kingship comes from the creator, the creative source. And the creative source has all these other elements that must be respected, because you do not approach the creative source. You don't approach them. We don't, as Amazulu, I speak about Amazulu, I don't know about others, but as Abantu, Bagwazulu, we don't approach Mvelingangi directly. We approach through our ancestors.
Yes.
We say, Tongolami, please speak on my behalf, because you are now in the spiritual realm.
Yes.
Speak on my behalf to the creator. The creator that can be reached. Because remember, there's another element which is unreachable. To the ones that we know, to Mvelingangi. Mvelingangi is being the source of is Abantu. So remember, there's other elements in life, not just Bantu. There's not just Bantu in the world. There are other elements in life that are living. There are other living sentient beings which are created, which come from also a different source, So those are the things that are a bit complex when it comes to Isintu. That's why it's important for us to not have this monotheistic view of what God is. Even the word God itself is a problem.
Before I let you go, please can you break down, you wanted to talk about the word Ntu.
Okay, all right.
Where we come from.
Yeah. So emsamo it's an altar, it's the family altar where we do our rituals and our prayers, or our supplications. Prayer also may not be the right word. We do our supplications, we speak to our divine beings and to our divine self also. And we proclaim things, emsamo, that we will not proclaim elsewhere. Emsamo is the place where the divine dwells symbolically in a home. Now, Abantu, let me go back to the Nile Valley. In 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, you find names of rulers like Mentuhotep. Mentuhotep the first, Mentuhotep the second, third, fourth, 5, 6, 7. You find, and then before the rulers, you find deities or neteru, natural powers, divine forces, called Montu. Now, Montu is a divine force which is attributed to the moon. Uinyanga.
Okay.
It's the power of the moon. The moon controls the waters. The moon controls the blood. The moon controls cycles of the sister, of the woman. Right? The moon. The moon is a symbol for these things, but the moon also, on a spiritual, energetic level, controls these things. So, isintu nabantu. Oh, and in Rwanda also, among the Kenya, Rwanda, and the people of Burundi and the people of Rwanda and those areas, you find words like Kintu, Sintu, Bantu, Antu, Hantu, right? Then Tu itself stands for the word soul or life force. One of the first life forces, the living beings, a sentient human being, was called Ntu. To the extent that Abantu abaning, Abantu now is called a language group, the Bantu language group. But the Bantu language groups comes from, the designation of the Bantu language group comes from the fact that those people had the word Ntu in common. Had the word Ntu in common. Other than Njambile or Isintu or Bantu or Hantu or Kintu. There's an ancient king in Rwanda who was called Kintu. It basically means the one from the soul source, the one whose source is soulful. I can trace my surname all the way to the word Ntu. Ndlovu kantu. Ndlovu is our most ancient ancestor. Mkhulu. Umkhulu kangakanani? Omkhulu. Some people can even say Nkulunkulu. But umkhulu wethu omkhulu is called Ntu. KwaMaseko. Now that's how I can relate also oMaseko to abakamapanga or to abakangcamane or to abakantsele or abakantshangase, or because all these people have Ntu in common. But you will find that all others, the Mnguni people, also can say Inkosi Abantu, Inkosi Enkulu, bani Ntu. So this word Ntu itself comes from the ancient Nile Valley, where part of us also comes from. Remember, some of us come from West Africa, some of us come from the Nile Valley, which is the eastern part of Northern Africa. This Ntu, we have both the West African Bantu and the East African Bantu, they share the word Ntu in common. But others, they use the word Nu to designate Ntu. It means the soul of the sun. Nu, Anu. It means the soul of the sun. Anu, Anura. Anura means Abantu, Bagara, the people of the sun. The sun-burnt faces, the sun rays, all these different things. So all these are basically codes and etymologies that help us to trace our origins to a divine source, which is Montu. You can just Google it, find out Montu. You'll find, when you Google Montu, you'll see a animal-headed god with the moon on his head.
Oh, wow.
You know, but it is not that we worship the moon. It is not that we worship the animal-headed deity. That thing is a divine, it's a natural, they call it anthropomorphism, where human beings attribute certain powers of an animal to an ancestral being or to another power as a code, as a learning tool, so that we can, like for example, when you talk about Inyang, a healer is Inyang, but Inyanga also is the moon. There's a relationship between healers and Inyang, but it's a topic for other days.
We're definitely going to have to call you back because there's a lot of information you've got for us. Even now, I'm sure, hey, the brain.
That's Abantu.
Hey, it's been on overdrive. Thank you for taking the time out to come and educate the upstanding citizens.
I love the term, upstanding citizens.
We are upright.
Like Sankara.
Right? Exactly. And I hope the audience is conscious of how we named you guys. We are the Africans who are now standing up. Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure for myself and the team. We'll see you next week. I want to have uncomfortable conversations. I want the room to be divided. I want people to be screaming and mad at each other. Then I want them to understand each other. I want to see things from a different point of view. This is Unpopular Opinion.